Hello and welcome to Copic in the Craft Room. I am Michelle Houghton and I am busy doing a series of snow images. So we did a snow family by Wild Rose Studios, and then I did another image by Stamping Bella with this same little girl on it. And I fell in love with these images. I just felt like they were so sweet and so cute. And so I have another one for you. So this one is again Valerie with Snowman. The last one was Valerie with Pup, if you did not see that video. And I'm trying to mix them up a little bit so you don't get tired of this specific one. So I took a break in between, but if I remember to. But I'm going to be coloring this one up, and we had a request for also some different sky and background techniques, and so that is what I'm kind of featuring along with that kind of memory piece of how to draw snow or how to get some of those fade to white pieces this month. So we're kind of spending the whole month on it, or at least a good chunk of it. So I will zoom in and speed us up and get coloring on this little image, Valerie with Snowman by Stamping Bella. So I'm actually going to start with the background this time. I'm drawing in a horizon line just so I try not to forget and go down into that snow. And I'm using a B41, and I've switched over to the chisel nib because I know I'm going to fill in a big area with this. So I'm going in small circles and really getting a nice smooth coverage over that entire area. I go over all of this at least 2 or 3 times so I get that nice rich even color. If I only go over the area one time or a couple times, a lot of times it'll look blotchy, and that's because I just don't have enough ink. So again, those small circles, I've got that broad chisel nib going, and that's going to help. But you can see as I fill it in and go over it second time, third time, it evens out quite a bit. So it's worth really taking the time to do that correctly. Then I'm going in with a B16, and I'm starting in and kind of flicking outward from the figures, the snow person and the little girl, so that it's darker in towards them and along that horizon line a little bit, and kind of flicking my color. It's solid in close to them and getting lighter as it comes out. And then I'm going back with my B41. Now notice the in numbers. I had a B16 and a B41. There's a big jump between those two, and as you can see, I'm working that and it's softening, but it's definitely not blending smoothly together. So I am going to go back and do a little more work with an in-between color. I'm going to come in with a B12, and I'm going to flick from that B16 into that B41, and that's going to actually help quite a bit. You can see that pulling the B16 a little bit into the B41, and then here I am again with the B41 smoothing that out, which I do think it turns out better, but I am going to add a texture to this one, and I knew that ahead of time. So I'm spraying Colorless blender onto a cotton ball, and then just dabbing that, spraying just a little bit more. Now I don't need a whole lot. You can see where I got a little bit extra and it kind of gave one big blotch. But that really evens out that sky. It has a nice kind of texture to it, but it kind of hides some of those areas where it's not as smooth. E11 is going to base her skin tone. And then E13 is coming in for the shadows. I go along the left-hand side of her face, the left-hand side of her nose, because she's looking straight at me. So if my light source is to the right, it's going to come in from, the dark is going to come in from the left. E04 for a little deeper shadows, and then smoothing that out with E13. BV20 is actually going to base her hair. I appreciate the stamp does quite a bit of the work on her hair, but I still want some color. BV20 and BV23, BV25. I'm flicking from that bottom edge up and from the part outward, trying to leave small amounts of that white highlight. BV29 to really darken up and give a little bit more show of where that marker is. From the bottom tips up and from the part out. Tiny bit of BV23 to kind of smooth some of those out, but very minimal. Then I'm going to come in on the Snowman, and I'm going to start with actually a C0. So I'm not starting with Colorless Blender this time. And I'm coming in, again, my darker side is that left-hand side, but it is round, so I'll have some shading over on the right too. C1 is next. And a tiny bit of C3 way down at that very bottom corner on both kind of sections of the snowman. And then the C1 to start smoothing. And the C0 is going to help smooth that out. It doesn't take much with those C's. It smooths really easily. And then the Colorless Blender finishes that off and fades it all the way to white. So easy with that C0. So I just did that at the end. C1, I'm going to start with some dots on the snow. I'm keeping the snow really simple this time. I'm not going to do a ton. And then C3, just for a little bit more, getting some of those shadows and texture into the snow. B60 is going to base her coat this time. So if you saw last week's video, it was the same little girl, and I'm kind of reversing the color combination here. So I've got B60 on her coat, some stripes on her scarf, her boots, her mittens and hat, and then B63 is going to come in and start some of that shading. So it's my mid-tone, and I'm flicking that from the dark areas into the lighter areas. Trying my best to kind of work my way around those swirls on the gloves or the mittens and the hat. B66 is going to go into those deepest shadow areas, places I know that are going to be the darkest. And I'm adding very small touches of B69 in just a couple places. I do it on the coat, and that really, then I start going backwards through my colors. B66, B63, and I'm just smoothing it out here, so it doesn't take a whole lot of effort because I'm going from the color onto the lighter color just to pull those across a little bit. And finishing up with a C0 because I felt like that was going to lighten it even further and kind of smooth that out a little bit more. So it's going to lighten it up and keep that highlight a little bit closer to white. G40 on the tights, and then an RV10 on all the dots and the scarf, the pom-pom on top of her hat, and some little details. RV13 to add just a touch of shading in all those areas. Nice and bright. And then RV10 or 10 to smooth those out just a touch. Doesn't take much. And snow image number 3. There we go. I really enjoyed doing both of these images from Stamping Bella. One of the things I personally like, the stamp is done in a sketchy type style. The lines aren't real crisp and clean. They look doodled, and that there's multiple lines or sketch lines around this. And so I feel like my coloring can reflect that as well. So I can keep my coloring looser. It doesn't have to be perfectly smoothly blended. But I like that aspect of these stamps. And so it becomes a quicker job to color them for me, because I like that look where you can see a little bit more of my brush stroke. It's kind of a fun, different approach. So one more sky approach, some blended colors with that texture on top just to kind of soften it all together. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed this week. Have a happy, colorful week, and I hope to see you back again. Thanks so much for joining me.